Toros II the Great, also Thoros II, was the sixth lord of Armenian Cilicia, or Lord of the Mountains. Thoros was taken captive and imprisoned in Constantinople in 1137 after the Byzantine Emperor John II Comnenus, during his campaign against Cilicia and the Principality of Antioch, successfully had laid siege to Gaban and Vahka. All Cilicia remained under Byzantine rule for 8 years. Unlike his father and brother, Thoros survived his incarceration in Constantinople and was able to escape in 1143. Whatever the conditions in which Thoros entered Cilicia, he found it occupied by many Greek garrisons. He rallied around him the Armenians in the eastern parts of Cilicia, and after a persistent and relentless pursuit of the Greeks, he successfully ousted the Byzantine garrisons from Principality, Vahka, Sis, Anazobus, Adna, Mamistra, and eventually Tarsus. His victories were aided by the lack of Muslim attacks in Cilicia and from the setbacks the Greeks and the Crusaders suffered on the heels of the loss of Edessa. Emperor Manuel I Comnenus, unhappy with Thoros's progress in the areas still claimed by the Byzantine Empire, sought peaceful means to settle his conflict with Thoros, but his attempts bore him no fruits. The recovery before 1150 of the Taurus fortresses by Thoros had not seriously affected Greek power, but his conquest of Mamistra in 1151 and the rest of Cilicia in 1152 had necessitated a great expedition. As a result, during the course of the next 20 years there were no less than 3 separate military campaigns launched by the emperor against Thoros, but each campaign was only able to produce a limited success. Thoros's accomplishments during his reign placed Armenian Cilicia on a firm footing. Thoros was of a tall figure and of a strong mind. His compassion was universal. Like the light of the sun, he shone by his good works, and flourished by his faith. He was the shield of truth and the crown of righteousness. He was well versed in the Holy Scriptures and in the profane sciences. It is said that he was of such profound understanding as to be able to explain the difficult expressions of the prophets. His explanations even still exist. His early years. Thoros was the second son of Leo I, Lord of Armenian Cilicia. The name and the origin of his mother are not known with certainty. It is possible that she was a daughter of Count Hugh Ivrethil, or she may have been the daughter of Gabriel of Melitene. In 1136, Leo I was made prisoner by Baldwin of Marash, who sent him off to captivity in Antioch. In his absence, his 3 sons quarreled. The eldest, Constantine, was eventually captured and blinded by his brothers. After 2 months of confinement, Leo I obtained his liberty by consenting to harsh terms. In the early summer of 1137, Emperor John II Comnenus came to Cilicia with a full force on his way to take Antioch. His army successively retook Seleucia, Korikos, Tarsus, Mamistra, Adna, Talhamdin and Anazobus. Leo I took refuge in the Taurus mountains, but at last found the situation hopeless, and surrendered himself to the conqueror. Thoros and his youngest brother, Ropand, were also taken captive together with the father. They were dragged away to Constantinople, where Leo I died in imprisonment in 1141. Ropand, after being blinded, was assassinated by the Greeks. His rule. The liberation of Armenian Cilicia. Thoros escaped from Constantinople about the year 1143. He fled to the island of Cyprus, which was then under Byzantine suzerainty, aboard a Venetian vessel, and then found his way to Antioch. He took refuge at the court of his cousin, Count Jocelyn II of Edessa, for there, in the company of a few trusted comrades, he was assisted by a Syrian priest, who led them by night to a safe shelter by the river Pyramus. They then crossed the Amanus range and reached the mountainous Armenian strongholds in the Taurus mountains, where Thoros began gathering anew. Following He recaptured the family stronghold of Vahka, and two of his brothers, Stephen and Mleh, joined him. He made friends with a neighboring Frankish lord, Simon of Raban, whose daughter he married. Leo died and was elevated to Christ. The emperor then felt compassion for Thoros, took him out of prison, and received him into the imperial guards. Being now in the imperial palace, and a soldier among the soldiers, he very soon distinguished himself, and even the emperor looked upon him with benevolence. Before the end of the year 1141, the emperor left Constantinople with a large army, and went to assist the Prince of Antioch, who was hard-pressed by the Turks. Being on a hunting party in the valley of Anazobus, one of his own poisoned arrows wounded him, and he fell dead on the spot. He thus met with his deserved fate. The Greek army returned, but Thoros remained in the country, though the traditions concerning this fact are different. Some say Thoros withdrew himself quite alone, went by sea from Antioch to Cilicia, and took possession of his dominions, finding means to gain at first the town of Amuda, and afterwards all the other places. But the emperor's party say that Thoros, during the time the Greeks stayed in the country, lived with a lady who gave him a great sum of money. With these treasures he fled to the mountains, and discovered himself to a priest as the son of Leo, the true king of the country. The priest was exceedingly happy at these tidings, and Thoros hid himself under a shepherd's disguise. There were many Armenians in this part of the country who, being barbarously treated by the Greeks, sighed for the former masters. To these men, as it is said, the priest imparted the joyful tidings. They instantly assembled and appointed Thoros the Baron. He gained possession of Vahka, and afterwards of many other places. Let this be as it may, it was certainly ordained by God that this man, who was carried away as a prisoner, should become the chief of the country of his forefathers, that he should take the government out of the hands of the Greeks, and destroy their armies. The first Byzantine attack against Cilicia, in 1151, while the Byzantines were distracted by the Muslim attack on Terbersil, Thoros swept down into the Cilician plain and defeated and slew the Byzantine governor Thomas at the gates of Mamastra. Emperor Manuel I at once sent his cousin Andronicus Comnenus with an army to recover the territory lost to Thoros. But Thoros was well prepared for the unsuspecting Greeks and consequently won a decisive victory. As Andronicus Comnenus moved up to besiege Thoros at Mamastra, the Armenians made a sudden sortie and caught him unawares. His army was routed and he fled back in disgrace to Constantinople. In the meantime, the Hathumids, who were pro-Byzantine sympathizers, did not overlook any opportunity for engaging in an anti-Ruthenian armed conflict. Andronicus Comnenus's mission was such an opportunity, but it was not an occasion for glory. Many of the numbers were killed by Thoros's aggressive strategy, and many more were taken into captivity. Among the captives were the two illustrious members, Ocean II of Lamperon and his son Hethum. Ocean II was eventually released for a ransom, but his son was kept as hostage. But Thoros arranged the marriage of his daughter to Hethum and returned half the ransom money to the groom's father, Ocean II of Lamperon. In the same year, 1151, Leo's son, Thoros, took Mamastra and Telhamdon from the Romans and seized Duke Thomas. Duke Andronicus, who was charged with protecting the land of the Cilicians by order of the Roman emperor, came to the city of Mamastra with 12,000 cavalry against Thoros. And he boasted, shouting out to Thoros, "Behold your father's iron chains. I will take you bound in them to Constantinople, like your father." When valiant Thoros heard this, he was unable to bear the insult. Instead, placing his trust in God, he assembled his forces, breached Mamastra's walls at night, and attacked the Byzantine troops, like a lion, putting them to the sword. Among those who died in the great battle before the city gates was Sempad, lord of Barbaron. Among those captured were the lord of Lamperon, Ocean, the lord of Partizepet, Vassal, and the lord of Prakan, Tigran, all of whom were on the side of the emperor. Thoros' troops seized and despoiled the weak Roman forces and then let them go. Wars with the Seljuks and Antioch. Emperor Manuel I Comnenus persuaded the Seljuk Sultan of Iconium, Masoud I, to attack Thoros and demand his submission to the Sultan's suzerainty. However, the ensuing Seljuk attack, which in fact was provoked by an Armenian raid into Seljuk lands in Cappadocia in the winter of 1154, was routed successfully by Thoros in collaboration with a contingent of the Knights Templar. In the year 603–1154, once again the Byzantine Emperor Manuel sought to stake Masoud, and he sent him twice the amount of treasure as previously, saying, "Quench the burning of my heart toward the Armenian people, destroy the fortresses, and exterminate them." So the Sultan came to Anazarbus with many troops, but he was unable to accomplish anything. He sent one of his grandees named Jacob to ravage the territory of Antioch. When they had crossed the gate, the brothers, the Knights Templar, as though sent by God, swooped upon them at the place and slaughtered all of them, including the chief. When those in the Sultan's army heard about this, they were horrified. This was not all, for the wrath of God was visited upon them. The horses perished from tapax, diarrhea, and they themselves turned to flight, brother not waiting to help brother, nor comrade. They hamstrung many of the horses and fled on foot through difficult, marshy places, as though they were persecuting themselves. For at that time Thoros was not in his country. Rather, he had gone to Sets. When he returned and saw what he had unfolded, everyone thanked God, for they had been defeated without the use of weapons and without a physical battle. Then the emperor turned to Antioch for help. He offered to recognize the new prince, Reinald of Chatillon, if the Franks of Antioch would fight for him against Thoros. He also promised a money subsidy if the work were properly done. Reinald willingly complied, as the Armenians had advanced into the district of Alexandretta, which the Franks claimed as part of the Principality of Antioch. After a short battle near Alexandretta, Reinald drove the Armenian back into Cilicia, and he presented the reconquered country to the Knights Templar. Other view is that after the battle Reinald was forced to return home, covered with humiliation, and later on, Thoros voluntarily surrendered to the brethren the fortresses in question, and the knights in turn took oath to assist the Armenians on all occasions where they needed help. Quote, in 1156, the Jacobites were allowed to build a new cathedral in Antioch, at whose dedication the Princess Constance and Thoros assisted. Having secured the land that he wanted, Reinald demanded his subsidies from the emperor, who refused them, pointing out that the main task had yet to be done. Reinald quickly sided with Thoros and conspired to attack Cyprus, and the Armenians attacked the few remaining Byzantine fortresses in Cilicia. The Sack of Cyprus in the spring of 1156, Reinald of Chatillon and Thoros made a sudden landing on Cyprus. Thoros and Prince Reinald both conducted widespread plundering of the island. The Franks and Armenians marched up and down the island, robbing and pillaging every building that they saw, churches and convents as well as shops and private houses. The core were burnt, the herds were rounded up, together with all the population, and driven down to the coast. The nightmare lasted about 3 weeks. Then, on the rumor of an imperial fete in the offing, Reinald gave the order for re-embarkation. The ships were loaded up with booty, and every every Cypriot was forced to ransom himself. In the meantime, Thoros quickly established a friendly rapport with Kilay Arslan II, the new Seljuk Sultan of Iconium, and in 1158 a peace treaty was concluded. In the year 606 A. 1157, Thoros' brother, Stephen Alio's son, motivated by his wicked nature and without his brother Thoros' knowledge, arose with his brigade of troops and started to successfully retake certain districts. He took Kokusan and Burdus. Sultan Kilay Arslan and Thoros had friendly relations with each other, and Stephen, as we said, took these areas without Thoros' consent. Owing to this disturbance, Kilay Arslan came to the district of Kokusan and pacified everyone, in no way blaming the inhabitants. Thence he went to Burdus, while Thoros, out of affection for the Sultan, tricked his brother and surrendered Burdus to the Sultan, against Stephen's wishes. The Sultan in turn, because of his affection for Thoros, freed the inhabitants of the fortress unharmed. Then Stephen attempted to steal Marash, today Kahramanmaraş in Turkey, but could not. Now it happened that Sultan Kilay Arslan had a genuine fondness for Thoros. He sent an emissary to Jerusalem and Antioch to Thoros, and again strengthened that friendship with an oath. The Second Byzantine attack against Cilicia. In the summer of 1158, Manuel I Comnenus launched his second assault on Thoros. At the head of an army, he marched down the usual routes leading to Seleucia. There, with a small rapid deployment force of horsemen and Seleucian troops, he launched a surprise attack on Thoros. Thoros was at Tarsus, suspecting nothing, when suddenly, one day in late October, a Latin pilgrim whom he had entertained came rushing back to his court to tell him that he had seen imperial troops only a day's march away. Thoros collected his family, his intimate friends and his treasure and fled at once to the mountains. Next day the Emperor Manuel entered the Cilician plain. Within a fortnight all the Cilician cities as far as Anazarbus were in his power, but Thoros himself still eluded him. While Byzantine detachments scoured the valleys, he fled from hilltop to hilltop and at last found refuge on a crag called Dajog, near the sources of the river Cydnus. Only his two most trusted servants knew where he lay hidden. Thus much of Cilicia was restored back to Byzantine control, but Thoros still held the mountainous regions in the north. Eventually, King Baldwin III of Jerusalem intervened and successfully brokered a peace treaty between the emperor and Thoros. Thoros had to walk barefoot and bareheaded to the camp of the emperor. There he prostrated himself in the dust before the imperial platform. Then pardon was accorded to him for his transgressions both in Cilicia and Cyprus, and still allowed to hold partial possession in Cilicia. The murder of his brother, Thoros' brother, Stephen, ignoring Thoros' official pledges to Manuel, with the help of a few of his supporters, continued attacking Greek garrisons, thus giving Andronicus Euphorbinus, the Byzantine governor stationed in Tarsus, the opportunity to sabotage the treaty. Stephen was invited to a banquet held in the governor's residence where he was seized upon arrival, and his mutilated corpse was flung over the gates of Tarsus. Thoros, who had his own reasons for desiring Stephen's murder, accused of Andronicus Euphorbinus of complicity and swept down on Mamistra, Anazarbus and Vahka, surprising and murdering the Greek garrisons. Eventually, reconciliation with the emperor was negotiated through the mediation of King Amalric I of Jerusalem. Andronicus Euphorbinus was recalled and replaced by Constantinos Kalamanos as the new Byzantine governor in Tarsus. in alliance with the Crusaders. In 1164, when Nur-ed-Din, the emir of Aleppo, knew that King Amalric I had left for Egypt, he struck at the Principality of Antioch and laid siege to the key fortress of Hirank. Prince Bohemond III of Antioch called upon Count Raymond III of Tripoli, Thoros and Konstantinos Kalamanos to come to his rescue. At the news of the coming, Nur-ed-Din raised the siege. As he retired, Bohemond decided to follow in pursuit. The armies made contact on the 10th of August near Arta. Ignoring a warning from Thoros, Bohemond attacked at once, and when the Muslims feigned flight, rushed headlong after them, only to fall into an ambush. Thoros and his brother Mleh, who had been more cautious, escaped from the battlefield. Around that time, Thoros visited Jerusalem and suggested the colonization of a large number of Armenians, but the Latin prelates forced King Amalric I to refuse the offer by their insistence that they should pay the dime. The Third Byzantine attack against Cilicia. Intermittent fighting erupted everywhere, harassing the Greek forces throughout Cilicia. In 1168, Emperor Manuel I, obsessed with his dilemma with Thoros, marched his armies into Cilicia for the third time under the command of Konstantinos Kalamanos. But Konstantinos Kalamanos was able to produce only limited successes, which in the end induced Byzantium to renounce its right of possession of the whole of Cilicia so long as it had access to the ports of the Gulf of Alexandretta. Byzantium also disclaimed all rights to direct government of Cilicia and accepted in settlement only Thoros' recognition of Byzantine suzerainty. His last years, Thoros quarreled with his brother Mleh, who, attempting to assassinate him, fled to Nur-ed-Din and became a Muslim. Now his brother Mleh was a malicious and treacherous man, and planned to kill his brother Thoros. Getting together some others of the same tendency, one day while they had gone out to hunt deer, Mleh wanted to slay his brother there at a place between Mamastra and Adna. But Thoros had been forewarned. He furiously seized Mleh and interrogated him before the troops and the princes as to what he was hoping to accomplish. They reproached Mleh in the presence and he was shamed. Then, Mleh gave to Thoros much of the inventory of his authority, horses, mules, weapons, and treasures, and they removed him from his district. Thus he received nothing in exchange for his wickedness. So, Mleh arose and went to Nur-ed-Din, lord of Aleppo, and entered into his service. Thoros, weary after nearly quarter of a century of rule and warfare, abdicated in favor of his young son Ropan, who was placed under the guardianship of Thoros' father-in-law, the regent Thomas. After his abdication, Thoros became a monk. He died in 1169. He was buried in the monastery of Drazok. Marriages and children. c. 1149, an unnamed daughter of Simon of Raban, Rita, the wife of Hetham III of Lampron, unnamed daughter, the wife of Isaac Ducas Comnenus. c. 1164, an unnamed daughter of the future regent Thomas Ropan II of Cilicia.